There is growing outrage tonight after an unarmed African-American teenager was shot and killed by police in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson, Missouri.
Witnesses said Brown's body lay in the street for hours.
I'd like everybody here to appreciate that it took a very long time yesterday to process this scene.
The shooting sparked a furious reaction.
Last night, again, in suburban St. Louis, the scene that photographers captured looked like a police state, using the same tactical get-up and the same weaponry we've come to expect in urban warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan. Police in Ferguson, Missouri once again had to put down and head off violence in the streets, following the shooting days ago of a young unarmed black man who was supposed to head off to college this week.
At the prosecutor's office, about 150 people called for justice for Michael Brown, the unarmed 18-year-old killed by police. Investigators said he had assaulted an officer. Protesters marched with their hands up, the stance witnesses say Brown took, and chanted. Local officials had planned today to release the name of the officer who's on paid leave, but the police chief decided not to, citing online death threats.
I'd gone to open the door and get out of the car, and when I did so, as I was opening the door, I said, "Hey, come here for a minute." And that's when he turned and said, "What the are you gonna do about it?" and slammed my door shut on me.
Slam the door shut?
Yes. I used my door to try and push him back and yell at him to get back. And again, he just pushed the door shut and just stares at me.
You're not God. You don't decide when you gonna take somebody from her. If that was the case, I brought him her. I should have took him from her. That was mine. That belonged to me.
Is there anything you could have done differently that would have prevented that killing from taking place?
No.
Nothing?
No.
And you're absolutely convinced, when you look through your heart and your mind, that if Michael Brown were white, this would have gone down in exactly the same way?
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be going over a very touchy subject that's still considered a very hot topic of debate in today's society.
On the night of August 9th, 2014, Michael Brown was shot and killed in the streets of Ferguson. The officer in question, Darren Wilson, faced no indictments in the case, but one could say his reputation as an officer was tarnished in the eyes of the general public. To this day, people hold protests in memory of Brown, hoping to one day find justice.
And now, without further ado, let's head out to our live field reporter, Ethan, as he tells us what the general consensus for this story looks like in our neck of the woods.
Well, let's just say people in the U.S. tended to feel a bit conflicted about the reporting on Brown's death. Some called it justified, while others called it a racially charged attack. While some articles found were very unbiased and focused on the facts of the shooting, others seemed to take sides. There were around 20 individual articles taking place over 2 weeks after the shooting, including an editorial written by the New York Times editorial board. It states their opinion of the shooting when they explain the racial history of Ferguson. What used to be a predominantly white community is now African American community, but the government and police force are ran by white people. And because of this, the white police force is performing more traffic stops on African Americans than Caucasians, which makes sense because a majority of the community is black. The editorial board ends this opinion piece stating that the shooting of Michael Brown is a reminder of a toxic racial legacy that still infects cities and suburbs across America. Another article tries to go deeper into the life of Michael Brown and how, despite the troubles he faced as a young man, he had his life under control at the time of the shooting. Whether or not these articles seemed biased or not is completely up to the reader's intuition. But it is clear that the incident is fresh in people's minds, as some of the articles I found were being updated as of 2018. This case still divides people to this day. Whether you want to support Brown or Wilson, the facts are pretty apparent, and it really comes down to your opinion. This is Ethan, signing off forever.
No, you're not supposed to say that.
Thank you for that, Ethan. I must say that this really is a divided case in our country. But what about our friendly neighbors to the north? North. We have another reporter live from Toronto. Take it away. Oh, are we live?
Yes. Yeah, so what we've seen from our source is while the case seemed to be very well documented, bias towards Brown's side could potentially be found. The most credible source for Canada was the Toronto Star's article covering the events that took place in Ferguson, which included up to 15 articles talking about the shooting. Like the United States, Canada is a common law country, and because of this, I wasn't expecting the articles to be much different from ones in the United States. When reading the Toronto Star's version of the Michael Brown shooting, the first thing I noticed was the title of the article. The title reads, Police Shooting of Unarmed Michael Brown Inflames Missouri Town's Race Relations. Immediately I feel that this article is going to be taking the side of Michael Brown because they add that he was unarmed in the title. The beginning of the article strongly focused on racism portrayed by the police toward Michael Brown and the people at the incident. The article goes on to discuss what happened right before the shooting. It first discusses the side of the police officers involved in the shooting, then talks about Michael Brown's friend Dorian Johnson's side of the story, which is completely different from the officers. Even though both sides of the story were told, it seemed as if the article showed bias toward Dorian Johnson's story. The article ends by telling us how Brown's body remained on the street for hours after the incident. From what I read, the US and Canada seem to hold very similar opinions in the case of Michael Brown. Although there may be some biases in the case, let's not forget there are always two sides to every story. I'm Brennan from Toronto, signing off.
Thank you, Brennan. Thank you, Brennan. Thanks, Brennan, buddy, old pal. Thank you, Brennan. That was very insightful.
Oh. Thank you, Brennan. That was very insightful. Now, let's take a look at what people thought about this case overseas. We're now going once again live to our field reporter in London as she tells us what our English cousins had to say.
So what I found was surprisingly a little different considering the coverage of this case. Now don't get me wrong, there was a lot of coverage of this case in the UK, but something seemed a little off about it. What I meant by it being off is how eerily similar cases like this in the US were to cases in the UK. I was surprised to see how much coverage there was on the Michael Brown case from the night of, through months out, even stories after a year. Just from the Daily Mail alone, I found over 100 news articles relating to the Brown shooting from when it happened to 2 weeks after. Although Daily Mail does use articles from other sources, I did find a lot of different sources overall. I think a big reason for this was because, one, there is a shared language, and second, because of the similar situation that happened in London back in 2011, 3 years before the shooting in Ferguson. Mark Dugan, a young black man, was shot and killed by a police officer, causing 4 days of rioting in the streets of London, similar to the riots after Michael Brown's death, although less extreme. A lot of the news stories were in support of Michael Brown rather than in support of Darren Wilson, the white police officer. I think this story was so big outside of the U.S. because it started a movement. The Black Lives Matter hashtag began, and people all around the world, including the UK, were having police violence put into a new perspective in how much it happens around the world, not just limited in the US. It turns out that we in the UK share a lot of common ground, not only with the amount of minority violence, but also the resistance against needless and unwarranted violence against African Americans in our countries. This is Sarah from London, signing out.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to have my afternoon British tea. Whatever, I'm gonna get fired today anyways.
As you can see, a lot of these reports are very similar in tone and overall come to the same conclusion about what happened at Ferguson. Although this case happened here in the States, it has left a big impact in other parts of the world. We hope you have enjoyed this very special report today and hope you have a safe and wonderful afternoon.